I never thought I'd end up working as a janitor in my own family's company. While technically it wasn't my family's company, it was my father's. But nobody knew that. Not even my stuck-up aunt and uncle who ran the day-to-day operations thinking they owned everything. Let me start from the beginning. My name is Sarah Chen, and my story begins with my father, James Chen, a brilliant businessman who built Chen Enterprises from nothing. But unlike most success stories, my father chose to stay in the shadows. He had his reasons, and I never questioned them until that fateful day everything changed. Growing up, we lived modestly in a small apartment above Dad's hardware store, his first business and the only one everyone knew about. Stay humble, Sarah. He'd always say, true power isn't about showing off. It's about understanding people at every level. I didn't realize then that he was preparing me for something bigger. When I turned 18, Dad sat me down for a serious conversation. Sarah, there's something you need to know, he said, pulling out a thick folder. I don't just own the hardware store. I'm the majority owner of Chen Enterprises. My jaw dropped. Chen Enterprises was one of the largest companies in our state, employing thousands of people. But everyone thinks Uncle Robert and Aunt Linda own it, I said, confused. Dad smiled that wise smile of his. They manage it, thinking they built it themselves. They don't know I bought the company through a holding corporation years ago. I let them believe they're in charge because, he paused, well, you'll understand why soon enough. That's when he proposed his crazy plan. He wanted me to work in the company, starting from the bottom, without anyone knowing who I really was. Learn every aspect of the business, he said. See how people treat others when they think no one's watching. Then you'll know who deserves to lead. So there I was, 22 years old, fresh out of business school, where I graduated top of my class. Though nobody at Chen Enterprises knew that, working as a janitor, I took the name Sarah Lai, claiming no relation to the Chen family. For 2 years, I cleaned offices, organized supply closets, and watched. I watched how Uncle Robert took credit for other people's ideas. I saw how Aunt Linda fired people just before their benefits kicked in. I witnessed their son, my cousin Michael, harass female employees while his parents covered it up, all while thinking they owned the place. But I also saw the good ones, like Maria in accounting who stayed late helping others with their work without asking for credit, or John in maintenance who used his own money to buy better safety equipment for his team when management refused. I kept detailed notes of everything, just like Dad taught me. Then came the day of the quarterly board meeting. I was cleaning the conference room as usual when Aunt Linda stormed in early. What are you still doing here? She snapped, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. Board meeting's about to start. This is for important people only. I continued wiping down the table. Just finishing up, Mrs. Chen. Uncle Robert walked in, already red-faced from his 3-martini lunch. Oh, it's the janitor girl, he sneered. You know, I always wondered, didn't you go to college or something? Couldn't make it in the real world, huh? I kept my face neutral, just as Dad had taught me. Yes, sir. Business major. That made them laugh. Business major. Hear that, Linda? We've got a regular CEO cleaning our toilets. Well, Aunt Linda said, adjusting her pearl necklace, I suppose someone needs to teach these entitled young people their place. Not everyone can be successful like us. I gathered my cleaning supplies, maintaining my calm exterior while my blood boiled inside. That's when my cousin Michael swaggered in, reeking of expensive cologne. Hey, janitor girl, he called out, blocking my path to the door. Why don't you stay? You can serve us coffee and maybe we can discuss your career opportunities later. He winked, making my skin crawl. That's enough, Michael, Aunt Linda said, not out of concern for me but for appearances. She's the janitor's daughter. We don't mix with those people. Actually, I said quietly, I should stay. I'm supposed to attend this meeting. The room erupted in laughter. Oh, this is rich. Uncle Robert wiped tears from his eyes. The janitor's daughter thinks she belongs in a board meeting. This is for real family only, Aunt Linda said coldly. Know your place and leave. I looked around the room, memorizing their smug faces. As you wish, I said, heading for the door. But you might want to delay the meeting for about 30 minutes. And why's that? Uncle Robert called after me. I turned back with a small smile. Because the CEO was running late. We're right here, you stupid girl, Aunt Linda snapped. Are you? I asked softly, closing the door behind me. I took the elevator to the ground floor, wheeling my cleaning cart into the supply closet for the last time. Then I went to the bathroom, opening the small duffel bag I'd stashed there earlier. Inside was a crisp business suit, Armani, Dad's gift for this special day. 10 minutes later, I stood in the lobby, transformed from the humble janitor to the polished businesswoman I'd been trained to be. Right on schedule, Dad walked through the front doors, looking impeccable in his custom suit. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. I took a deep breath, thinking of all the hard-working employees who deserved better leadership. Ready. As we walked to the elevator, I couldn't help but smile, imagining the looks on their faces when they learned the truth. The real storm was about to begin. The elevator ride to the top floor felt like ascending to a battlefield. Dad squeezed my hand reassuringly, just like he used to do before my school presentations. But this was no school presentation. This was about to be the most dramatic moment of my life. "Remember," Dad said quietly, "stay calm no matter what they say. True power is in control." The elevator doors opened, and we could already hear the chaos from the conference room. Aunt Linda's shrill voice carried down the hallway. "Where is everyone? The other board members should be here by now." Dad checked his watch and smiled. "Right on time. The real board members should be arriving now." As if on cue, the elevator behind us opened, and out stepped 5 distinguished-looking individuals. The actual board of directors, handpicked by my father years ago. They all nodded respectfully to Dad, then to me before heading toward the conference room. "Shall we?" Dad gestured forward. I took one last deep breath and nodded. It was showtime. The look on Uncle Robert's face when Dad walked into the room was priceless. He went from red to white to slightly green in a span of seconds. Aunt Linda's jaw dropped so far, I thought it might hit her expensive pearls. "J. James?" Uncle Robert stammered. "What are you doing here? You run the hardware store." "Hello, Robert," Dad said calmly, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Linda, Michael, I believe it's time we had a proper family meeting." "Family meeting?" Aunt Linda's voice went up an octave. "What is she doing here?" She pointed at me like I was something she found stuck to her designer shoe. I smiled, taking the seat to Dad's right. "Well, Aunt Linda, I work here, remember?" "As a janitor," Michael spat. "Security. We need security in here." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," one of the board members, Mr. Harrison, spoke up. "Considering Ms. Chen here is your boss." The room went deadly silent. You could have heard a pin drop. What is he talking about?" Uncle Robert's voice trembled. Dad leaned forward, placing his hands on the table. "Let me explain something. 25 years ago, when you two came to me begging for help with your failing business, I saw an opportunity. Instead of just giving you a loan, I bought the company through my holding corporation. You've been working for me this entire time." "That's impossible," Aunt Linda shrieked. "We built this company from nothing. We made it successful." "Did you?" I asked, opening my laptop. "Let's review some interesting numbers, shall we?" In the past 2 years alone, you've embezzled approximately $2.3 million through fake consultant fees. You fired 47 employees just days before their benefits would kick in. And let's not forget the sexual harassment complaints against Michael that you've been covering up. Michael lunged forward, but security, the real security team that reported directly to Dad, was faster. They were already positioned by the doors, having entered silently during the chaos. "You can't prove any of this," Uncle Robert snarled, but his shaking hands betrayed his fear. "Actually, we can," Dad said, nodding to Mr. Harrison, who started distributing thick folders to everyone present. "Every transaction, every fired employee, every complaint. It's all here. Documented, verified, and ready for legal action if necessary." Aunt Linda started to cry, her makeup running down her face. "But we're family. You can't do this to family." "Family?" I stood up, my voice steady but filled with controlled anger. "Was it family when you made Maria from accounting work overtime without pay? Was it family when you fired John from maintenance for requesting better safety equipment? Was it family when you treated me, your own niece, like garbage for 2 years? You were spying on us?" Michael looked like he might be sick. "No, Michael. I was learning exactly how you treat people when you think you have power over them. Learning who deserves to lead this company and who doesn't." Dad stood up, his presence commanding everyone's attention. Robert, Linda, as of this moment, you're both terminated from your positions at Chen Enterprises. Michael, you're not only fired, but will be cooperating fully with the pending criminal investigation into your behavior. You can't fire us. Uncle Robert roared, standing up so fast his chair fell backward. We'll fight this. We'll go to court. Please do, I said sweetly, pulling out one final document. By the way, remember that contract you signed last month? The one about the company restructuring that you didn't bother to read properly? Their faces showed dawning horror. That contract included a clause about immediate termination without compensation in case of proven financial misconduct. I continued. It also included a non-compete clause and a requirement to repay any misappropriated funds. Oh, and you might want to check your company accounts. They've already been frozen. Aunt Linda collapsed into her chair, sobbing openly now. Michael stormed toward the door, but was stopped by security. Uncle Robert just stood there, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. You have until the end of the day to clear out your offices, Dad said firmly. Security will escort you. And if you're wondering about the board meeting, it already happened this morning. The vote was unanimous. Sarah is the new CEO of Chen Enterprises, effective immediately. As security led them out, their protests echoing down the hallway, I couldn't help but think about all the employees who had suffered under their leadership. This wasn't just about revenge, it was about justice. Well, Dad said, turning to the board members with a smile, shall we discuss our plans for the company's future? But before we could continue, my phone buzzed with an urgent message. Something was happening in the lobby, something that would make this dramatic day even more explosive. The urgent message was from Maria in accounting. You need to come to the lobby now. Your aunt is telling all the employees they're being fired. People are panicking. I exchanged a quick look with Dad. Go, he said. Show them what kind of leader you really are. Taking the elevator down, I could hear the chaos before the doors opened. Aunt Linda's voice rang through the lobby. That's right, everyone's fired. My brother-in-law and his janitor daughter are destroying this company. The lobby was packed with worried employees. Some were crying, others were angrily making phone calls. In the center of it all stood Aunt Linda, her mascara-streaked face twisted with rage, still wearing her designer suit but looking somehow smaller without her power. We built this company, she was shouting, and now they're throwing everyone out. All because of that sneaky little spy. I stepped out of the elevator, my head held high. The room gradually fell silent as people recognized me, not as the quiet janitor anymore, but as someone different, someone in charge. Actually, I said, my voice carrying across the lobby, no one's being fired except the people who've been stealing from this company and mistreating its employees. Sarah? Maria pushed through the crowd, looking confused. What's going on? I smiled at her, my first genuine smile in this building. Let me introduce myself properly. I'm Sarah Chen, daughter of James Chen, the true owner of Chen Enterprises. And as of today, I'm your new CEO. The lobby erupted in murmurs. I held up my hand for silence. For the past 2 years, I've worked alongside all of you as a janitor, not to spy, but to learn. I learned who stays late to help their colleagues without asking for credit. I nodded at Maria, who blushed. I learned who spends their own money to keep their team safe. I smiled at John from maintenance, and I learned who treats people with respect regardless of their position. This is ridiculous, Aunt Linda shrieked. You can't possibly. Security, I interrupted calmly. Please escort Mrs. Chen out of the building. Her access has been revoked. As security led her away, still screaming about betrayal, I turned back to the employees. I understand you're worried. Change is scary. But I promise you this, the only people leaving today are those who have abused their power. In fact, I pulled out my tablet. I have some announcements to make. First, effective immediately, all employees will receive a 15% raise to match market rates. The money my aunt and uncle embezzled will be redirected to employee benefits. Gasps and excited whispers filled the lobby. Second, we're implementing all the safety improvements that John recommended. No more cutting corners on worker safety. John's maintenance team broke into applause. Third, Maria is our new head of finance, assuming she accepts the position. I turned to her. You've been doing the job unofficially for years anyway. Time you got the title and salary to match. Maria's eyes filled with tears as her colleagues congratulated her. And finally, I continued, We're establishing an open door policy. Every employee will have direct access to management. No more harassment, no more intimidation, no more fear of speaking up." The lobby erupted in cheers. As I looked at the smiling faces around me, I felt Dad's hand on my shoulder. He'd come down to witness this moment. "Well done," he whispered. But we weren't quite finished. That evening, as employees were leaving work with renewed hope, Uncle Robert made one last desperate attempt. He barged into my new office, waving papers. "I found proof," he shouted. "Proof that James acquired this company illegally. We're taking this to court." I stayed calm, remembering Dad's lessons. "You mean these documents?" I held up identical copies. "The ones showing how you and Aunt Linda were planning to sell the company to a known criminal enterprise to cover your gambling debts?" His face went pale. "Yes, Uncle Robert, we know about the underground casino, the loans, everything. So here's what's going to happen. You'll sign this agreement promising to never contact this company or its employees again. In return, we don't press criminal charges." "You're blackmailing me," he sputtered. "No, Uncle Robert. I'm protecting this company and its people, something you should have been doing all along." After he left, defeated, Dad joined me at the window. The sun was setting over the city, casting a golden glow across the skyline. "You know," he said, "when I started this company, I dreamed of building something that would last generations, something that would make a difference in people's lives. Watching you today, I realized my dream came true, just not in the way I expected." I hugged him tight, remembering the little hardware store above which we used to live. "Thank you for teaching me that true power isn't about wealth or position. It's about how you treat people," he finished. 1 year later, Chen Enterprises was transformed. Our employee satisfaction rates were at an all-time high, productivity had increased by 40%, and our ethical business practices were being studied by business schools. Maria turned out to be a brilliant CFO, implementing transparency measures that became industry standards. John revolutionized our safety protocols, reducing workplace incidents to near zero. Even the janitors, my former colleagues, were now shareholders in the company. As for my aunt, uncle, and cousin, last I heard, they'd moved to another state, telling anyone who would listen about their ungrateful niece who stole their company. But their words couldn't touch me anymore. Sometimes, when I'm working late, I still grab a mop and clean alongside the evening janitorial staff. It raises eyebrows among visiting executives, but I don't care. It reminds me of where I started and why I'm here. After all, true success isn't measured by the power you hold, but by how you use that power to lift others up. That's the real family business. The boardroom felt suffocating as I watched Marcus strut around the table, waving papers like they were winning lottery tickets. 10 years of building my company from the ground up, and he thought he could take it all with a few forged signatures. "You should see your face," he laughed, loosening his designer tie. "Did you really think I'd let you run this forever?" A woman with a high school diploma playing CEO. "My name is Rachel Chen, and at 42, I was watching my husband attempt to steal everything I'd built. The irony? When I met Marcus 12 years ago, he was a junior accountant drowning in student debt. I was the owner of a small but growing tech company, looking for someone to help manage the books. He seemed perfect then, smart, ambitious, and supportive of my vision. He understood numbers in a way I never did, and I trusted him completely. That was my first mistake." The board already approved the transfer of power. Marcus continued, sliding documents across the polished mahogany table. "Your signatures on everything. Really, you should thank me for making it so easy. No messy legal battles." I picked up the papers, examining the forged signatures he'd somehow managed to create. My hand didn't shake, my voice didn't waver. Because Marcus had made one crucial error. He thought I was just another self-made entrepreneur who'd gotten lucky. He had no idea I'd been planning for this moment for 3 years. It started with a lipstick stain. Not on his collar. Marcus was too careful for that. It was on a financial report he'd handed me, a smudge of red that matched his secretary's signature shade. That night, I started digging through our company records, and what I found made my blood run cold. Small discrepancies in the books, unauthorized transfers, board meetings I supposedly attended while I was out of the country. But instead of confronting him, I did something else. I started buying shares in our company through shell corporations, using the money I'd set aside for our anniversary trip to Paris. Each time Marcus met with his lawyer, thinking he was orchestrating my downfall, I was quietly increasing my ownership stake. By the time he made his move, I owned 80% of the company through various entities he knew nothing about. I'm giving you a week to clear out your office, Marcus said, checking his Rolex, the one I bought him for his last birthday. Be grateful I'm not having security escort you out now. I stood up, smoothing my skirt. That's very kind of you, Marcus. I'll need that time to gather my things. He frowned, clearly thrown by my calm demeanor. That's it? No fighting back? No tears? Why would I cry? I asked, picking up my briefcase. Everything happens for a reason, right? As I walked out of the boardroom, my heels clicking against the marble floor, I could feel his eyes on my back. He was probably congratulating himself, thinking he'd finally won, that the woman who gave him everything was walking away with nothing. I pulled out my phone and made a call. Sandra, it's Rachel. Remember that contingency plan we discussed? It's time. Sandra, my lawyer for the past 20 years, had helped me set up the shell corporations. She'd warned me about Marcus 3 years ago when she noticed the first signs of his deception. Men like him, she'd said, they always think they're the smartest person in the room. Use that. And I had. Every step of his plan to take over my company had played right into my hands. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, watching employees filter in with their coffee cups and concerned glances. News of Marcus's takeover had spread quickly. I could see the pity in their eyes, the woman who built everything, now losing it to her husband. By noon, Marcus had moved his things into my office. My family photos were already in a box by the door, replaced by his pretentious art pieces and that hideous modern desk he'd been eyeing for months. He even changed the security codes, probably worried I'd try to steal client files or company secrets. I've scheduled a company-wide meeting for this afternoon, he announced, lounging in my chair. Time to inform everyone about the changes in leadership. I nodded, continuing to pack my belongings. Of course. Will you be keeping Sarah on as CFO? Sarah, he laughed. No, I'm bringing in my own team. Can't have your loyal subjects hanging around, causing trouble. Sarah had been with me since the beginning, when we were working out of my garage with nothing but 2 laptops and a dream. She was also the only other person besides Sandra who knew about my contingency plan. The company meeting was set for 3 p.m. in the main conference room. As employees filed in, Marcus stood at the front, practically glowing with self-satisfaction. I sat quietly in the back, next to Sarah, who was gripping her tablet so hard her knuckles had turned white. As you've probably heard, Marcus began, there have been some changes in ownership. I know change can be scary, but I assure you, under my leadership, this company will reach new heights. That's when Sarah stood up. Actually, Mr. Chen, there's been a slight update to the ownership structure that you should be aware of. Marcus frowned. I don't remember asking for your input, Sarah. In fact, consider this your. Perhaps, I interrupted, standing up as well. You should take a look at these documents first. Sandra chose that moment to walk in, carrying a stack of papers that made Marcus's earlier display look like a post-it note. Behind her came 2 members of the board. The real ones, not the stand-ins Marcus had used to approve his takeover. What's this? Marcus demanded, his confidence wavering for the first time. This, Sandra said, her voice carrying across the now silent room, is documentation showing that Firetech Industries, Summit Ventures, and Highland Capital, 3 of your largest shareholders, are actually owned by your wife. The color drained from Marcus's face as Sandra continued laying out documents. Together, these entities control 80% of the company's shares, which means any decisions about leadership need to be approved by the majority shareholder. That's impossible, Marcus sputtered. I vetted every major shareholder personally. Did you? I asked, walking to the front of the room, or did you just see what you expected to see? A bunch of impressive-sounding investment firms that seemed eager to support your plans. The room was dead silent as realization dawned on his face. Every step he'd taken to seize control had been built on a foundation of lies. Lies that were now crumbling beneath him. You can't do this, he hissed, grabbing my arm as I passed him. I'm your husband. I pulled away, my voice steady. Actually, as of this morning, you're not. The divorce papers were filed an hour ago. You might want to check your email. The collective gasp from our employees was almost comical. Marcus reached for his phone with shaking hands, only to find his access to the company's servers had already been revoked. "Security will escort you out," I said, nodding to the two guards who had appeared at the door. "Don't worry about packing up. We'll send your things to your new address. Oh, and Marcus, you might want to check the prenup you signed. The infidelity clause is particularly interesting." As Marcus was led out, still protesting, I turned to address the stunned employees. "I owe you all an explanation, and you'll get one. But first, we have work to do. Sarah, could you pull up the quarterly projections?" The room slowly came back to life, but nothing was the same. The whispers had already started. How had I known? How long had I been planning this? But more importantly, what kind of leader orchestrates something like this? They were about to find out. The aftermath of Marcus's removal sent shockwaves through the industry. Within hours, news had spread about how the wife of a would-be corporate usurper had orchestrated one of the most elegant takedowns in recent business history. I spent the next week in meetings, reassuring clients and partners that the company was stable. But something interesting happened. Instead of causing panic, the incident actually strengthened our position. Clients who had been hesitant to work with us suddenly showed renewed interest. "Your handling of the situation," one CEO told me, "showed exactly the kind of strategic thinking we want in a partner." Marcus, meanwhile, was discovering just how thoroughly I'd outmaneuvered him. The prenup he'd signed included a clause about infidelity that not only protected my personal assets but required him to repay every penny he'd earned during our marriage if he was caught cheating. The evidence I'd gathered over the years, the hotel receipts, the secret bank accounts, the photos his secretary had been all too happy to share once she realized he'd been playing her too, was overwhelming. "He's trying to negotiate," Sandra told me during one of our daily briefings, "offering to drop any claims to company assets if you waive the prenup penalties." I considered it for a moment, then shook my head. No deals. He needs to learn that actions have consequences. The company thrived in the following months. Without Marcus's secret draining of resources, our profits increased by 40%. The toxic culture he'd fostered among certain executives cleared up once they realized their protector was gone. One morning, about 6 months after the takeover attempt, I arrived at the office to find an envelope on my desk. Inside was a letter from Marcus's mother, Margaret. "I always knew you were smart," she wrote, "but I never realized just how capable you were. Marcus told me everything. Not willingly, but the truth has a way of coming out. I want you to know that while he's my son, I understand why you did what you did. He needed this lesson, even if he doesn't see it yet." I folded the letter and tucked it away in my desk. Margaret had always been kind to me, even when her son wasn't. Her words meant more than she probably realized. The real changes came in how I ran the company. The experience had taught me valuable lessons about trust and vigilance. I implemented new oversight measures, created a more transparent corporate structure, and established a foundation to help women in business protect themselves from similar situations. 1 year after Marcus's failed takeover, I stood in the same conference room where everything had come to a head. We were celebrating our most successful quarter ever, and I had an announcement to make. "As some of you know," I began, looking at the faces of people who had stood by me through everything. "We're launching a new initiative today. The Phoenix program will provide resources, legal support, and mentorship to women entrepreneurs who find themselves in vulnerable positions. Because sometimes the biggest threats to our success come from those closest to us." Sarah, now our COO, was the first to applaud. The rest of the room followed suit, and I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with victory or revenge. This was about transformation, turning a painful experience into something that could help others. Marcus, last I heard, he was working as a junior accountant at a small firm in Denver, living in a studio apartment and driving the same car he had when I first met him. Sometimes karma has a perfect sense of irony. The company continues to grow, but more importantly, it grows the right way, with transparency, integrity, and a commitment to lifting others up rather than tearing them down. The shell corporations I created to protect myself from Marcus now fund programs that help other women protect themselves and their dreams. In the end, Marcus did teach me something valuable. Success isn't just about building something great, it's about being smart enough to protect it. He thought he could take everything from me, but instead he gave me the push I needed to become even stronger. Now, when people ask me about Marcus and the takeover attempt, I just smile and say, sometimes the best revenge is simply being prepared. Because while he was plotting to steal my company, I was learning the most important lesson in business. Trust is good, but documentation is better. The conference room where this all ended is still there, but I've had it renovated. The mahogany table where Marcus once strutted around with his forged documents has been replaced with a modern design that features a subtle phoenix pattern in the wood grain. It's a daily reminder that from the ashes of betrayal, something stronger can rise. Hi, I'm Alexandra Chen, but my mother-in-law insisted on calling me the help. For 2 years, I lived in the servants' quarters of the Morrison family mansion, while secretly being their landlord. But let me start from the beginning. I met William Morrison at a charity gala where I was volunteering as a server. He was the handsome heir to the Morrison fortune, known for their luxury hotel chain. I was actually there gathering information for my real estate investment firm, but he didn't need to know that. When he defended me from a rude guest who'd spilled wine on my uniform, I saw something genuine in his eyes. What William didn't know was that I was worth more than his entire family. By 30, I built Asia's largest luxury hotel acquisition firm, with properties worth over $3 billion. But I'd learned early that money changes how people treat you. So when William asked me out, thinking I was just a waitress with a kind heart, I decided to keep my success quiet. Our whirlwind romance was like a fairy tale until I met his mother, Victoria Morrison. The moment she learned her son was dating a server, her face contorted as if she tasted something bitter. A waitress? She'd sneered during our first meeting. Really, William, I thought we raised you better than this. What will people say? But William stood firm, and we got married in a simple ceremony that his family barely attended. That's when Victoria decided to teach me my place in the Morrison family. Since you're so experienced with serving, she announced at our wedding reception, you can stay in the servants' quarters. It'll be just like home for you. William protested weakly, but his mother held the purse strings. The Morrison fortune wasn't what it used to be. Their hotel chain was struggling, but they kept up appearances. Victoria made it clear. Either I stayed in the servants' wing, or she cut off William's inheritance. What nobody knew was that 6 months before meeting William, my company had secretly acquired the Morrison mansion through a complex series of shell corporations. The family had been quietly renting their own home without realizing it. Their hotel chain was in even worse shape than they knew, and I was positioning myself to acquire it. For 2 years, I lived the life of a servant in my own house. Victoria made me use the back entrance, eat in the kitchen, and help the actual household staff with chores. If you're going to live here, she'd say, you need to earn your keep. I watched as they hosted lavish parties with money they didn't have, bragging about their legacy while their empire crumbled. Victoria would parade William in front of eligible socialites, pointedly ignoring my presence as I served champagne in my own home. Then came last week. The bank called about their overdue mortgage payments that were actually due to my company. Victoria threw a fit in her private study, not knowing I could hear every word. We need more time, she shouted into the phone. Do you know who we are? The Morrisons have owned this house for generations. That's when I decided it was time for the real owner of the Morrison mansion to make herself known. Because tomorrow morning, Victoria had arranged a meeting with the bank manager to beg for an extension. She'd insisted I come along. Apparently, my lowly presence would emphasize their desperation. Little did she know, I'd already arranged my own surprise for the meeting. The next morning, Victoria swept into the bank in her Channel suit, practically dragging me along in my simple dress. Stand behind me and try to look pathetic, she hissed. Perhaps they'll take pity on us if they see we're charitable enough to keep you around. The bank manager's office was opulent with a view of the city skyline. Victoria had insisted we meet at this specific branch, the city's most prestigious, to maintain appearances. What she didn't know was that I owned this building too. Mr. Phillips will be with you shortly, the secretary announced. Phillips? Victoria frowned. We're supposed to be meeting with Mr. Henderson, the branch manager. There's been a change, I said quietly. Mr. Phillips is actually the CEO of Royal Crown Banking. Victoria's head snapped around. How would you know that? Before I could answer, the door opened. Thomas Phillips walked in, my longtime friend and business partner. He took one look at me standing meekly behind Victoria and had to suppress a smile. Mrs. Morrison, he began formally. I understand you're here about the mansion's mortgage. Yes. Victoria straightened her spine. There's clearly been a mistake. The Morrisons have owned that mansion for generations. These payment demands are ridiculous. Actually, Thomas said, opening a folder, the Morrison family hasn't owned that mansion for nearly 3 years. You've been renting it from Shield Properties. Victoria laughed dismissively. Impossible. We would never rent. We own that house. Your family sold it to avoid bankruptcy in 2021, Thomas continued. The paperwork is quite clear. You've been paying rent to Shield Properties, albeit irregularly, ever since. The color drained from Victoria's face. No, there must be some mistake. William. Tell them. William, who had been silent until now, looked confused. Mother, what is he talking about? Perhaps, I said softly, stepping forward, I can clarify the situation. I reached into my simple handbag and pulled out my own folder. Shield Properties is a subsidiary of Chen International Holdings. Victoria's eyes narrowed. What would you know about it? Get back in your place. My place? I smiled, pulling out my company ID and placing it on the desk. You mean as CEO of Chen International Holdings? Or as the owner of this bank? Or perhaps you mean my place as the actual owner of the mansion you've been living in. The silence was deafening. William's coffee cup slipped from his hand, spilling across the imported carpet. This is a joke, Victoria stammered. You're a waitress, a nobody. Actually, Thomas interjected, Ms. Chen, Mrs. Morrison, is one of the largest real estate developers in Asia. Chen International Holdings owns properties worth over $3 billion, including the Morrison hotel chain's main properties. The hotel chain, William whispered, but that's our family business. Not exactly, I said gently. Your family has been secretly selling off pieces of it for years. My company now owns 60% of the Morrison hotels. We've just been allowing you to keep the name. Victoria swayed on her feet, grabbing the desk for support. But I wasn't finished yet, because I had one more revelation that would completely shatter Victoria's carefully maintained world. But here's what's really interesting. I continued, pulling out another document. Do you know why I was at that charity gala where I met William? I was evaluating the Morrison hotel chain for acquisition. But then I met your son, and I saw something different. Someone different from the rest of your family. Victoria had collapsed into a chair, her perfectly manicured hands trembling. All this time, in my own house. Your house. I raised an eyebrow. The house where you made me use the servants' entrance, where I had to eat in the kitchen, where you made me serve drinks at your parties. I think I'm going to be sick, she whispered. Mother, William finally spoke, his voice tight with anger. You made my wife, the owner of our house, sleep in the servants' quarters. I didn't know, she wailed. How was I supposed to know? Would it have mattered? I asked quietly. Should it have mattered? Would treating a servant with basic human dignity have been so difficult? Thomas cleared his throat. Mrs. Morrison, there's still the matter of the overdue payments. Yes, I nodded. You're 3 months behind on rent. According to the lease agreement, I can evict you immediately. Victoria's face went from pale to ashen. You wouldn't, where would we go? Actually, I have a proposal. I opened my laptop. Chen International is planning to convert the Morrison hotel chain into our new luxury brand. We need someone to manage our European properties. William leaned forward, interest sparking in his eyes. The position is in Paris, I continued. It would mean leaving the mansion, living more modestly at first, and actually working for a living. But it's a chance to earn back what your family lost. Through merit this time, not just name. I won't, Victoria declared. A Morrison, working as an employee? Never. Mother, William cut in sharply. You're not in a position to refuse. Not anymore. He turned to me, his eyes full of remorse. I'm so sorry, Alex. I knew Mother's treatment was wrong, but I was too weak to stop it. I'd understand if you want nothing to do with me anymore. I reached for his hand. Actually, the job offer was for you, not your mother. I married you because I saw your potential, William, not your family name. It's time you had the chance to prove that potential. 6 months later, the Morrison mansion was converted into a boutique hotel. Victoria moved in with her sister in Connecticut, her social standing in tatters. William and I moved to Paris, where he threw himself into learning the hotel business from the ground up. To everyone's surprise, especially his mother's, William excelled. Free from his family's expectations, he proved to have a natural talent for hospitality management. Within a year, our Paris property's revenue had doubled. As for me, I still volunteer at charity galas occasionally, just to remind myself that true character shows in how you treat people when you think they're nobody. Yesterday, we hosted a hotel management training seminar. I overheard William telling the new staff, "Remember, treat every guest and every employee like they own the place, because one day I learned that the servant I ignored was actually my boss." Victoria still sends the occasional email, always asking when we'll restore the family name. I keep her messages in a special folder labeled Lessons in Humility. The mansion's servant quarters, I converted them into a staff training center, where every new manager starts their journey learning to serve before they can lead. Because sometimes the best way to teach humility is to let people discover it themselves, even if it takes losing everything they thought made them important. After all, true class isn't about where you sleep. It's about how you treat others when you're awake.
The hospital cafeteria hummed with lunchtime chaos. Nurses grabbing quick meals, doctors reviewing charts, the clatter of trays and hiss of coffee machines creating constant noise. I sat in a corner booth, trying to eat a sandwich that tasted like cardboard, watching my mother hold court at a table surrounded by her nursing colleagues. Linda Matthews, head nurse of the rheumatology unit at St. Joseph's Medical Center, was in her element. At 54, she'd built a reputation as a no-nonsense nurse who ran a tight ship. Her staff respected her. Her supervisors praised her efficiency. And right now she was talking about me. "My daughter is the perfect example of what I'm always saying," my mother said, her voice carrying. "Young people today don't want to work. They find any excuse to avoid responsibility." I shrank lower in my seat, hoping she wouldn't notice me. I'd come to St. Joseph's for a follow-up with Dr. Patricia Harrison, my rheumatologist. The appointment ran long and I was too exhausted to drive home without eating first. "Emma is 28 years old," my mother continued, "and she works maybe 15 hours a week from home doing data entry. She claims she has lupus, but I've looked at her labs. Nothing definitive. Just some elevated markers that could mean anything." A younger nurse asked, "Has she seen a specialist?" "Oh, she's seen specialists," my mother said dismissively. "Multiple times here at St. Joseph's. But these rheumatologists love to diagnose lupus because it's vague enough they can't be proven wrong. Emma has joint pain and fatigue, symptoms 90% of people experience from stress and poor lifestyle choices. But instead of exercising and getting a real job, she's convinced herself she has a serious autoimmune disease." I felt tears burning. I did have lupus. Systemic lupus erythematosus, diagnosed 18 months ago after years of worsening symptoms. The joint pain my mother dismissed as normal had progressed until some mornings I couldn't open jars or button clothes. The fatigue wasn't from poor lifestyle. It was my immune system attacking my organs. I didn't work 15 hours a week by choice. I'd been a financial analyst at a major investment firm making $135,000 annually, until lupus flares became so severe I couldn't function. Typing hurt my swollen joints. Brain fog made complex analysis impossible. I'd resigned and taken contract work doing basic data entry because it was all I could manage. "The worst part," my mother continued, "is she's gotten family believing her act. Her aunt started a GoFundMe for her medical expenses. 28 years old, collecting money because she's too lazy to work full-time. I hadn't asked my aunt to start that GoFundMe. She'd done it after visiting me during a bad flare when I'd been bedridden for 2 weeks, my face covered in the butterfly rash, my joints so inflamed I couldn't walk. The $8,000 raised had helped pay for medications insurance only partially covered. "I keep telling her to snap out of it," my mother said. "Get up, get moving, stop wallowing." But she just wants to play victim and collect sympathy. I couldn't listen anymore. I stood, my joints screaming, and walked toward the exit. That's when I saw him, Dr. Robert Chin, Chief of Medicine at St. Joseph's, standing near the coffee station. He was looking directly at my mother's table, his expression dark. Our eyes met. Dr. Chin and I knew each other. He'd been consulted on my case when Dr. Harrison suspected kidney involvement. He'd reviewed my labs, confirmed lupus nephritis, and adjusted my medication. He knew exactly how sick I was. "Miss Matthews," he said quietly, approaching. I didn't know you were here today. I had an appointment with Dr. Harrison, I said, voice shaking. I was just leaving. I couldn't help overhearing your mother's conversation. The nurse discussing a family member with lupus. That's you. I nodded, unable to speak. And she's saying your lupus diagnosis isn't real? That you're lazy and avoiding work. She's always thought I was exaggerating. She's a nurse. She thinks she knows better than specialists. Dr. Chen's jaw tightened. Miss Matthews, would you meet with me in my office? I'd like to review your medical records with your permission. Why? Because what I heard raises serious concerns about a nurse on my staff demonstrating profound lack of understanding of autoimmune disease and potentially spreading harmful misinformation about a patient, even if that patient is her daughter. 30 minutes later, I sat in Dr. Chen's office, having signed releases for him to access my complete file. He reviewed everything. The positive ANA test, the anti-dsDNA antibodies, the complement levels, the kidney biopsy showing lupus nephritis, the photographs documenting my malar rash during flares. Your mother said your labs showed nothing definitive, Dr. Chen said finally. That's categorically false. You have textbook lupus with organ involvement. Your diagnosis is as definitive as it gets. She doesn't believe autoimmune diseases are real, I said quietly. She thinks they're excuses for lazy people. And she's head nurse of our rheumatology unit, Dr. Chen said, his voice hard. The unit that treats patients with the exact condition she's claiming doesn't exist. He looked at me directly. Miss Matthews, I need your permission to take action. What your mother is doing isn't just personally cruel. It's professionally dangerous. If she holds these views about you, how is she treating our lupus patients? What kind of action? A formal investigation into her patient care practices and professional conduct. The things she said, dismissing lupus as laziness, claiming rheumatologists overdiagnose, suggesting patients are malingerers. Those statements from the head nurse of a rheumatology unit are alarming. I thought about all the times my mother had dismissed my pain. All the times she'd told me to push through it. All the family gatherings where she'd made jokes about my fake illness, while I struggled to hold a fork with swollen hands. Do it, I said. The investigation began the next day. Dr. Chen requested a review of patient complaints against the rheumatology nursing staff over 2 years. What they found was disturbing. Multiple patients had complained about the head nurse, my mother, telling them their pain was all in their head, or they just needed to exercise more. Several lupus patients reported she'd questioned their medication needs, suggesting they were taking too many pills for something that's not that serious. One patient had filed a formal grievance after my mother told her lupus was basically just being tired, and she should stop being dramatic about normal aches. Dr. Harrison, my rheumatologist, was interviewed. He was horrified. I had no idea Linda Matthews was Emma's mother, Dr. Harrison told investigators. I've been treating Emma for 18 months. She has severe lupus with kidney involvement. She's on immunosuppressants, antimalarials, and corticosteroids. She's dealing with a serious, potentially life-threatening condition with remarkable grace. And her mother has been telling people, including my nursing staff, that lupus isn't real? That explains why patients have complained about dismissive treatment. The investigation expanded. They reviewed how my mother ran the unit, how she trained new nurses, what she told staff about patients. They found she'd created a culture of skepticism around autoimmune diagnoses, frequently telling staff that patients were exaggerating or drug-seeking or just depressed. Several nurses came forward confidentially reporting that my mother had discouraged them from spending too much time with patients she deemed complainers, which included most lupus and rheumatoid arthritis patients. Dr. Chen called me in 1 week after the investigation began. Miss Matthews, I want you to know what we've found. Your mother has been running the rheumatology unit with fundamental misunderstanding of autoimmune disease. She's been dismissing patient symptoms, questioning physician treatment plans, and creating a hostile environment for some of our sickest patients. What happens now? She's being placed on immediate administrative leave pending completion of our investigation. Based on what we've found, I don't anticipate she'll return to her position. She's demonstrated a pattern of behavior incompatible with patient care, particularly in a unit serving vulnerable autoimmune patients. My phone started ringing that afternoon. First my mother, furious. Emma, what did you do? They've suspended me. This is your fault. Then my father, your mother gave 30 years to that hospital. How could you sabotage her career because she hurt your feelings? Then my brother, Mom questions your diagnosis and you try to get her fired? That's vindictive. I didn't answer any of them. I was reading the email Dr. Chen had forwarded. A message to all nursing staff about the importance of believing patients, supporting physician diagnoses, and understanding that invisible illnesses were real. The investigation concluded 2 weeks later. My mother was terminated and reported to the state nursing board for demonstrated pattern of dismissing patient symptoms and undermining physician treatment plans. The board opened their own investigation into whether her license should be suspended. The hospital issued a statement. St. Joseph's Medical Center is committed to providing compassionate, evidence-based care to all patients, particularly those with chronic conditions. Any staff member who demonstrates dismissive attitudes toward patient symptoms will be subject to disciplinary action up to and including termination. My mother's termination became known throughout the local medical community. Other hospitals heard about the head nurse fired for dismissing lupus patients. No one wanted to hire her. She left me a voicemail 2 weeks after termination. Emma, I've lost everything. My job, my reputation, my career. And for what? Because you were too sensitive about me questioning whether you're really sick? I hope you're happy. I listened once, then deleted it. 3 weeks later, I received a letter from the state nursing board. They'd suspended my mother's license for 6 months and required her to complete continuing education on autoimmune diseases and patient advocacy before she could apply for reinstatement. My family sent a collective email. Emma, your mother's career is destroyed. She can't work for 6 months and even after no one will hire her. You've ruined her life because she didn't believe you were as sick as you claimed. Was it worth it? I wrote back one sentence. She told a cafeteria full of nurses that lupus isn't real while I'm on immunosuppressants to keep my kidneys from failing. Ask her if that was worth it. 6 months later, my mother completed her required education and had her license reinstated. She found work at a small clinic 2 hours away, no longer in leadership, no longer working with rheumatology patients. Just basic nursing under close supervision. I'd started physical therapy and found a new medication combination helping manage my flares. I'd increased my work hours to 25 per week, and my former employer had reached out about potential part-time consulting. Dr. Harrison had become an advocate for better nursing education on autoimmune diseases. She'd written an article for a nursing journal about the harm caused when healthcare workers dismiss invisible illnesses. She'd used my mother's case, anonymously, as an example. My family never apologized. They still believed I'd overreacted, that I'd destroyed my mother's career over a difference of opinion. But I hadn't overreacted. I'd protected other lupus patients from a nurse who thought their disease was laziness. I'd stopped someone in a position of power from spreading dangerous misinformation. She'd called my lupus just being lazy to her nursing staff. She'd dismissed a serious autoimmune disease attacking my kidneys. I'd silently shown my medical file to her chief of medicine, letting the evidence speak. Her next shift was her last, because you can't run a rheumatology unit while believing rheumatologic diseases aren't real. I survived lupus. I survived the family that told me I was lazy. And I survived being raised by a nurse who thought compassion for chronically ill patients was optional. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in a hospital isn't a patient with autoimmune disease. It's the nurse who refuses to believe those diseases exist.